How I Became an Expert in English. Hello, and welcome to today's story. Whether you're tuning in from your morning walk, commuting to work, or simply relaxing at home, I'm thrilled to have you here. Today's story is all about a journey, my journey to mastering English. But don't worry. This isn't just another language learning tutorial. I'll be sharing not only the steps I took, but also the challenges, the mindset shifts, and even the little victories along the way that helped me become fluent. It's not just about knowing vocabulary or grammar rules. It's about the way English opened up new worlds for me. Learning English changed my life. It's the language that connected me to new cultures, friendships, and opportunities I never imagined I could have. And by the end of this story, I hope you'll feel inspired to either start or continue on your own English learning journey. Now, before we dive into my story, let me share a bit about this session. Whether you're just starting out with English, or you're looking to fine-tune your skills, this space is for everyone. In each story, we take a deep dive into topics that can help you not only improve your language abilities, but also understand the cultural and social nuances that come with it. But we don't stop there. Each story is packed with examples, personal experiences, and tips that are grounded in real-life learning. And I always aim to leave you with actionable advice that you can apply immediately. So, let's get started. Like many of you, I didn't start out as an expert in English. In fact, English wasn't even my first language. I grew up in a small town where English was hardly spoken, and it was only introduced as a subject in school when I was about 10 years old. Back then, it seemed like just another subject, something to memorize for tests. But as I got older, something changed. It was in my teenage years, around the age of 14, that I had my first real interaction with the English language outside of a classroom. I remember vividly, it was through music. Pop songs from English-speaking artists had become incredibly popular at the time, and I was hooked. I wanted to understand the lyrics, the message behind the songs. I wanted to sing along without just mimicking the sounds. At first, I did what most learners do. I used translation apps and dictionaries, but I soon realized that understanding a word in isolation wasn't enough. English is full of nuances, idioms, and phrases that don't translate directly into my native language. So, I decided to dive deeper. I remember spending hours with a notebook, writing down the lyrics of my favorite songs, looking up meanings, and memorizing phrases. At the time, I didn't realize it, but this was one of the most important turning points in my journey. And if you're wondering why music can be such a powerful tool for language learners, here's an interesting fact. Studies show that listening to music can improve language learning by up to 30%. When you listen to songs repeatedly, you not only familiarize yourself with the language's rhythm, but also with common phrases and slang that you wouldn't necessarily learn in a textbook. But let's be real for a second. Learning a language is not without its challenges. And believe me, I faced plenty of them. One of the biggest hurdles I encountered early on was speaking. While I could understand words and sentences in writing, I struggled to produce coherent sentences when I spoke. There's that moment every learner experiences. The fear of making mistakes. It's paralyzing. You feel self-conscious, you worry about what others will think, and worst of all, you start doubting yourself. I recall my first attempt at having a full conversation in English. I was 16, and I was on a family trip to a nearby city where a lot of tourists visited. There was this small cafe we stopped at, and I saw an English-speaking tourist looking for directions. I remember thinking, this is my chance. I've been studying for years. I can do this. But as I walked up to them, everything I'd practiced seemed to vanish from my mind. I stumbled over my words, mixing up grammar and phrases. I could see the confusion on the tourist's face, and I felt embarrassed. But here's the thing. This moment was crucial in my learning journey. Why? Because it taught me that mistakes are part of the process. Language learning isn't about being perfect. It's about communication. And from that day on, I started practicing speaking more, embracing the errors, and learning from them. You might be wondering how often this happens to language learners. Well, according to a survey by Cambridge University Press, around 80% of language learners report feeling nervous when speaking in a foreign language, especially in the beginning. That's a huge number, but it also means you're not alone in this struggle. In fact, if you're feeling that nervousness right now, it's a sign you're pushing your limits, and that's where real growth happens. Another major breakthrough came when I discovered the power of immersion. Now, when I say immersion, I don't necessarily mean packing your bags and moving to an English-speaking country, although that would be amazing. For me, immersion came in the form of media, TV shows, documentary, podcasts, and even social media. I immersed myself in English content as much as possible. Now, I wish I could say that after a few months of immersion and speaking practice, I became fluent. But that wouldn't be true. Like any learner, I hit what's commonly known as the plateau. This is that dreaded phase when progress feels slow, and no matter how much you study, you feel like you're not improving. For me, the plateau happened after about 2 years of consistent learning. I was stuck. I could understand conversations, but I still had trouble expressing more complex thoughts and ideas. And at this point, many learners give up. But here's what helped me push through it: changing my approach. Instead of focusing solely on learning more vocabulary or perfecting my grammar, I shifted my focus to practicing with purpose. I started setting small, achievable goals, like writing short essays or recording myself speaking about a topic for 5 minutes a day. I also started using language exchange apps to chat with native speakers. These small steps were crucial because they made me feel like I was making progress again, even if it was slow. I want you to remember this. Progress in language learning is not always linear. There will be highs and lows, but the key is to stay consistent and patient. And if you're currently feeling like you're in a plateau, don't worry. It's a sign that you're transitioning from beginner to intermediate or even advanced. It's the hardest part, but it's also where the most growth happens. Then came the breakthrough. After months of pushing through the plateau, I had a moment of clarity. I was watching a live-streamed event with native English speakers, and for the first time, I realized that I was understanding almost everything without having to translate in my head. I didn't have to pause to think about grammar or structure. It just flowed naturally. This breakthrough didn't happen overnight, of course. It was the result of consistent practice, immersion, and a shift in mindset. But when it came, it was an incredible feeling. It made all the struggles, the mistakes, and the self-doubt worth it. It was also around this time that I started thinking about using my English skills professionally. I began teaching English to beginners, which in itself was a whole new learning experience. Teaching others solidified my own understanding of the language. There's a saying that to teach is to learn twice, and I found that to be absolutely true. So, here we are, at the end of my journey to becoming an expert in English. It wasn't a straight path. It was filled with moments of self-doubt, excitement, frustration, and finally, achievement. But every step taught me something valuable, not just about the language, but about myself as a learner. If I can leave you with one piece of advice, it's this. Don't be afraid of the journey. Embrace the mistakes, the challenges, and the small victories. Remember that every time you struggle, you're one step closer to mastering the language. And who knows? One day, you might look back, just like I'm doing now, and realize just how far you've come. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope my story has given you the motivation and insight you need to continue on your own English learning path. If you found this session helpful, be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more stories, tips, and practical advice in future videos. Until next time, keep learning, keep practicing, and keep growing.